Hey everyone, Rowan here for Common Fate. Today I want to show you what access testing looks like on the Common Fate platform. This is one of those features that you get when your policies are actually treated as code. I see a lot of vendors out there talking about this, and while it's nice to have your policies in a text file, something you can commit alongside your code, what's really powerful is when you can treat those policies actually as code when it comes to things like testing in this example. What we can do here is create a suite of tests that we then run against our environment. So this is very much like integration testing. If you think about a testing pyramid where you have unit tests, integration tests, and end-to-end tests. So this lets us make some high-level assertions about what we should and should not be able to do in our environment. And once we have those in place, we can then check to see if that is actually true. And this is really, really nice, not only because it gives you a much faster feedback loop than, for say going in and checking out in the interface, or, actually going and taking the action and seeing if you get rejected by the system. You can get almost immediate feedback as to whether or not the change that you've made has worked well. And on top of that, you can then incorporate that into your pipeline process so that you can get feedback alongside the changes you're making, just like you do with code and running tests. So let's see what it looks like. To start with, we'll go into our Common Fate environment where I've got the Common Fate CLI tool installed, and I will first start by creating some tests, and the command line gives you a nice and quick way to see some demo tests, which we'll then modify for our use case. So I run this command and then I will see the test file being created, and then we can have a look at that and see what's inside it. And there's two main sections that you can see here. The first section is group tests, which is about asserting what groups a user is in, and this lets you be sure that you're testing the right thing. The next section is access tests, and as the name suggests, this lets you find out who can do what, and this is really where most of the interesting testing is going to happen. You can specify users via their email address, which is a convenience on top of the entity ID that's actually being used in the policies, and you can check what targets and level of access that it gets, and also the expected result, whether you think it's something that they should automatically be approved for, or maybe it's something that they should require access to, and in other cases, things that they have absolutely no access to. All right, here's one I prepared earlier, and you can see that I'm checking my own user to see that I'm part of the security group, and in this case I've used the entity ID to specify it, just to make it a little bit more explicit. In the access tests, things get a little bit more interesting. Here I'm checking to see that I have view-only access into a specific AWS account alias, and in this case I expect to be auto-approved. This is a good way of testing the day-to-day activities that your developers will do. This is something that I might do as part of my day job, and so it doesn't require that manual approval, but it is something we want to test because it ensures that I don't have standing access to everything, and I can just get the access that I need when I need it with as little as friction as possible. The next test that I'm going to do is test an OU within AWS. So this is a collection of account, an organizational unit in AWS organizations terminology. And in this case, I do want to have view-only access, but it will require approval. And this could be an example of maybe some production-like accounts that I may need to access in order to do some troubleshooting or some investigative work, but it's something that does require a bit of oversight. And finally, the last test case here I have in the access tests section is something that I shouldn't have access to. So in this case, I'm looking at an account and maybe saying that this account is not something that I should ever have administrator access to. I shouldn't be able to request that level of access. It certainly shouldn't be granted or activated. And so in this case, I'm expecting to see absolutely no access. So now that my tests are ready, I'm going to run them against my Common Fate environment. And here you can see it going through the access test and the group membership test, and I get a little summary there saying that everything is passing. So this is a happy result. I'll show you what it looks like when you don't pass in just a moment. But here you can see that it's verified that I was auto-approved for the first check of view-only access, requires approval as the expected outcome for the second check, and finally I had no access to use the AWS Administrator Access role in the third test case. So this is something you can easily include into your CI/CD pipeline so that every change you make will give you this kind of feedback and also give you this record of what was working at what time. So what does it look like when it fails? Here I am running exactly the same test cases, but I've made some changes in the background that will stop them from passing. And sure enough, you can see that I've failed that third test case there that was asserting that I had no access to the AWS Administrator Access role. And what has happened here is it's explained that actually what I got was the auto approve action, which is probably not ideal if I'm looking to keep people out of this role. The tests were nice enough though to explain where I need to look, and here I can see that there's a number of places that are potentially either allowing me to request access or allowing me to actually activate that access request. And so as an example, we can see here that we have basic policy 0 and also access policy 0. And if we jump into some of these sample policies, which is what I'm using in the background, we can actually see why this policy is failing this test. If I jump into my basic CEDAR policy, which is what I'm using in the background here, I can see that the very first statement, statement 0, is actually permitting all principals to request access to any resource. Now, this is not the policy that is actually allowing that access, that's sitting somewhere else, but this is explaining why I'm failing. If I wanted my principal to have no access, well, I've already failed it here in this very first statement. So obviously I'm going to have to take some action to clean that up if I want my tests to pass. That's what access testing looks like in Common Fate. Thanks very much for watching, and if you've got any questions or would like to find out more, just head on over to the commonfate.io website and you can either book a demo or check out your own free trial if you're interested. Thanks.